Good morning. Sorry, try that again. Good afternoon, everyone. For those that don't know me, my name's Stephen Kelly. I'm Chief Executive of Manufacturing Northern Ireland. You're all very welcome along to our webinar this afternoon about carbon and about energy savings. Very pleased to be joined by my colleague Aidan Dugan, who some of you may know, and by Ben Craig. And Ben is the Head of Partnerships and Business Development at Carbonfit, who have partnered with Manufacturing Northern Ireland this year from our Manufacturing Month. Ben leads on Carbonfit's partnerships and business development, helping organisations fast track their net zero goals. And as we know, whether it's due to specific business costs or demands of both customers and consumers, as well as government policy, we all have an eye on those net zero goals and doing what we can within our manufacturing businesses in order to ensure that we reduce carbon as part of our processes and part of our products. Carbonfit's platform turns that carbon data that you'll be able to recover into timely and, most importantly, actionable insights that will ensure that you reduce your carbon, but also reduce your energy prices and energy costs. Ben's past work has delivered more than almost £3.5 million in savings and cut about 42,000 tonnes of CO2 in Northern Ireland. And he's also led on circular economy research across the island of Ireland. We're just chatting before we came online. Ben's an entrepreneur himself, as well as an adventurer, and he's been particularly keen on getting into the water off the west coast of Ireland, where he's actually ranked number 4 in the world for kayak surfing. So that's where Ben and I differ. He's brave, doesn't mind the cold. I'd prefer a sundowner and a sunbed than that sort of experience. But you're all very welcome along today. Energy prices, carbon reduction, net zero, these are all issues that are top of the agenda for many manufacturing businesses, not least because of the costs of doing business. And we saw our energy prices rise through the energy crisis and the invasion of Ukraine. Even today, our energy prices are close to about 50% more expensive than they were on those long run prices. So anything we can do within our businesses in order to become more efficient, to reduce that carbon, and to ensure that we have the most efficient production processes is good for the planet, but it's also good for the bottom line as well. We will be recording the session. The session will be shared afterwards in our e-signs, as well as the slides. And Ben has a very decent offer for all those that are attending this morning as well, which he'll take you through. You will have the opportunity to ask questions. Please use the chat function or the Q&A function, and Aidan and I will have a look at those questions as they're coming through and give those questions to Ben at the end of his presentation. As I say, we'll share a recording, we'll share the slides, but do take the opportunity to ask whatever burning questions you may specifically have. Burning's probably not an appropriate term for this one, but if you have any questions that are requiring some answers, then I'm sure Ben would be very, very happy to do that at the end of the session or after the session as well. Ben, you're very welcome. We'll hand over to yourself and we'll come back around again when the Q&A begins towards the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Stephen, and that's a really kind introduction. And I do love a sundowner as well, I have to say. Though I was jealous to hear you were, just recently down in Connemara. It's one of my most favorite places on the planet. Just totally stunning. Okay, so I'm going to share a screen here. Bear with me just whilst I start the slideshow here. Okay, so welcome to today's webinar, The Energy Opportunity, Unlocking Savings, Resilience and Compliance for Manufacturers. As Stephen outlined, I'm Ben Craig. I'm from Carbonfit, and he gave a really nice little illustration of what it is that we do. But in essence, I suppose, we're a team of net zero engineers and educators with a quite sophisticated platform that helps us really position businesses with the best possible foot forward to take advantage of the opportunity that net zero represents. And today we're going to specifically look at what that opportunity is in terms of energy. Not just in terms of reducing emissions, but how manufacturers can unlock real cost savings, strengthen business resilience, and stay ahead of compliance requirements. So as a quick little flow through what we're going to cover today, I'm going to dive into this question of, why energy matters more than ever. And Stephen gave a really useful little lead into that. We've had a really dynamic geopolitical space over the last period of time and a lot of other events that have contributed to rising energy costs. And in the circumstances we find ourselves in, I think, this is a really, really critical point for businesses to take note of. So we're going to dive into that question. We're going to look at the flip side of that. What is the cost of inaction? And what is the opportunity for you to really position your business with that best foot forward? And then we'll look at, what are some actions that you can take? What are some practical things that you can do moving forwards? And then, as Stephen mentioned, I've got a bit of an offer for you, which I'll unpack just at the end. So diving straight into that question, why energy matters more than ever, especially within the manufacturing industry? Well, I think it's fair to say that energy is no longer, just a back office overhead. It's now a boardroom issue, a growing concern for leadership teams across the manufacturing sector. Rising energy costs and ongoing market volatility are putting real pressure on your margins. Prices are unpredictable, and many businesses are locked into contracts that don't reflect their actual needs. Secondly, net zero targets and tightening environmental regulations, things like ESOS, SECR, and upcoming carbon disclosure rules, things like CBAM, are pushing organizations to demonstrate real action on their emissions. So it's not really optional anymore. And thirdly, we're seeing increased supply chain pressure, especially from large customers or public sector organizations who are setting strict sustainability criteria in their procurement requirements. So if you want to remain part of key value chains, especially in sectors like food and drink, automotive, or aerospace, you need to prove that you're managing your environmental impact. And together, these things come together to make an energy strategy not just a cost issue, but it's a business critical priority. And we haven't even talked about efficiency within all of that. And I know that's something that's kind of part and parcel of manufacturing broadly. Nobody likes to waste things. Lean manufacturing is absolutely at the core, I'm sure, of your modus operandi more broadly, but have not yet met a single manufacturer that doesn't like to save a pound here or there where they can, and that's really what we're going to try and look at here. But what is that cost of inaction? What if you just kind of, do the status quo? Maybe your energy bill has lapsed its contract date and you're just paying whatever comes in. But, the risk of doing nothing, it's not just environmental, it's financial, operational, and increasingly commercial. Those higher bills and ongoing price volatility mean that manufacturers without an energy strategy are exposed to sudden shocks that can hit profitability hard. So if things ramp up in the Ukraine, or if things ramp up in the ongoing geopolitical alliances, and I'm sure you've kind of seen in the news what's going on with India and China and Russia, and I think it's we live in very unpredictable times at the moment, and things are shifting fast. So energy intensive businesses are particularly vulnerable here, especially when market rates surge unexpectedly. Then there's the matter of missed opportunities for funding. There are actually a lot of grants for energy upgrades, support for audits, or incentives for renewables, and these schemes are often time sensitive. The Digital Transformation Flexible Fund, for example, is often undersubscribed, and businesses that delay action frequently miss out. Finally, there is a growing risk of non-compliance and financial penalties. CBAM comes in with financial tariffs in January. And as environmental regulations tighten, failing to meet your legal obligations or even failing to report accurately can lead to fines, reputational damage, or loss of business. And in some cases, it's not just about penalties, it's about being excluded from tenders or frameworks where sustainability is now a key requirement. Good news is you don't need a full system overhaul or huge amounts of capital to start seeing some real results. In fact, most manufacturers that we work with uncover 20 to 30% in potential energy savings simply by addressing inefficiencies in their current operations. And that's not just carbon. As I said before, this is a bottom line win. Reducing emissions directly reduces your energy costs and often improves performance and reliability too. Many of these improvements have a surprisingly fast payback period, sometimes under a year. And in the case of things like smart meters and understanding, where you are burning energy more than you need to, sometimes I've heard of payback times being like 6 weeks. So it really can fluctuate significantly on that. So many of these improvements do have that surprisingly fast payback period, sometimes under a year, but optimizing things, fixing compressed air leaks, upgrading lighting, upgrading motors, these are quick wins and they build momentum and free up cash for more long-term investments. So before you think about renewables or big retrofits, the first step is often making better use of the energy you're already paying for. The best energy you have is the energy that you have not used. That is the pound that you get to keep. And that is the best option moving forwards. So the first step, where do we start here? First step, of course, is gaining visibility. There is that old adage, you can't manage what you can't measure. Okay, so it's absolutely true. So we got to start with data. We need to understand what is our consumption, and we can get kind of sidelined or attracted by the big shiny. You might see your competitors installing huge solar panel arrays, or they're installing new facilities, or doing a whole range of different things, and that may be absolutely the right thing for them to do. But likely they have looked at the feasibility of doing that and they've prioritized what to do first. And the real, important piece to understanding that is your data. Getting a real handle on that, you need that visibility. So that's why we always recommend starting by baselining your energy usage using smart monitoring tools, and that gives you real-time insights into where, when, and how energy is being consumed across your site. Once you have that data, you can start to spot that low-hanging fruit. Things like unnecessary lighting left on during downtime, compressed air leaks, or equipment still drawing power during changeovers or lunch breaks. These might seem minor on their own, but across an entire facility, that can add up to significant waste, particularly as you scale. The next step is process optimization. Looking at how and when equipment is used, how production is scheduled, and where controls or automation can help smooth out peaks and reduce unnecessary load. It's not always about spending more. Sometimes it's just about running things a little bit smarter. And that data is really going to give you the picture of where those pain points are, where are the opportunities for that optimization, for that efficiency. And that's why we start there. Okay, so the term resilience is, probably a bit of a buzzword, a bit of a jargon word these days. It can be talked a lot about in terms of leadership, but here we're going to be using it in terms of energy. And I think this flows right throughout really your supply chain when you kind of zoom out a little bit. But talking about energy resilience, we're talking about your ability to withstand and adapt to disruption. Whether that is a sudden spike in energy prices, a supply shortage, or a power outage that halts production. And, we've seen stuff like that happening across Europe in the last 12 months. For manufacturers, that kind of disruption isn't just inconvenient, it can mean missed deadlines, spoiled product, lost revenue, the risks go on. And that's why more businesses are starting to diversify their energy sources. So they're reducing reliance on a single fuel type or supplier. And alongside that, it's essential to develop backup strategies for grid instability, such as automatic switchovers, load prioritization, or contingency shutdown protocols. So we're seeing our clients typically looking at increased investment in on-site generation, things like solar panels or combined heat and power units, which not only reduce emissions, but give businesses more control over supply. And the key with those things is making sure that they are spec'd correctly for your business and your growth plans. And coming back to that data piece again, that's absolutely critical to make that assessment. So you want to pair that with battery storage, perhaps, and you can avoid expensive peak charges or keep critical systems running if the grid goes down. This again, those kind of decisions are going to depend partly on your appetite for investment and your payback period. But I think certainly if you look over the longer term, but certainly, hopefully the medium term, those things, and especially if you're a large energy user, really start to make a lot of financial sense. Don't overlook your energy contracts. And, this is something I'm going to pick up on at the end of this presentation. But, starting to look at flexibility in your supply agreements, giving room to maneuver if markets fluctuate is really, really important. And especially if your energy contract has lapsed, there's a huge opportunity for you. So, to kind of sum all of that up, basically resilience is about control over cost, control over supply, and continuity of supply. It is becoming the defining characteristic of successful industrial energy strategies. And I know that, Invest and I have done a really wonderful program of work at looking at what is, a really smart green economy industrial strategy for Northern Ireland. And there's probably, a range of different businesses on the call today who've been involved in that process. And again, grouping together on some of these things can really build up a lot of economies of scale and build even more resilience into that system as well. So don't underestimate that piece of the puzzle too. Compliance, it's a pretty boring word, but regulatory compliance around energy and carbon is certainly accelerating. We are getting, we're about 5 years out from 2030, which is when a lot of the big government targets come due. Regulation is increasing towards that. This is where a lot of the legislative compliance is really, starting to ramp up. And there's been a little bit of an easing of the shock of this new kind of regulatory compliance for companies, because necessarily people need a phasing in time. And I suppose my advice here is this is going to ramp up. There has been an easing of things for the next number of months, but it is going to kick in. And so rather than delay, go, okay, great, things are delayed for kind of 12 months, I don't need to act now. You're going to really be behind the 8 ball in terms of compliance if you're not building these things in now. So things like SECR, if you're growing, is something where you're going to need to have a real handle on your scope 1 and 2 reporting, and you're going to need to include that in your annual report. It is linking with ESOS. If you're slightly bigger, you'll be familiar with ESOS, but it's now becoming a report that has teeth and requires an action plan. And if you don't comply with it, there's now like £15,000 fines and stuff like that, and public naming and shaming and so on. This is really to get people to say, listen, we're asking you to have a look at how you can save energy within your business, and do that because this is ultimately how we're going to drive emissions down across our whole geography here. And we need to do that collectively as an industry. And, if you're carrying out this assessment and then you're just kind of ticking a box, setting that report on a shelf and not really doing anything about it, you're not really going to be showing that trajectory of efficiency, those energy savings that are coming from those opportunities. And if we refresh back a couple of those last slides, there is real opportunity in terms of cost savings alongside the carbon savings with that. So these things are kind of critical and are being sharpened and streamlined and working together, basically to kind of remove the opportunity for people to kind of duck and dodge actually taking action, but also to make it more of a point of competitive advantage to companies that are taking action. Standards like ISO 50001, which many will be familiar with, does focus on energy management. It's seen as the gold standard for manufacturers looking to formalize and improve their performance. This requirement can feel like a burden, but it is also a springboard. You really want to stack these things together, and then you want to be able to use them to evidence actually what you're doing. And this is where, bringing these things together for procurement exercises really starts to maximize the value for you in terms of business development. Procurement teams and auditors are placing growing emphasis on sustainability performance, and many buyers now ask for carbon reduction plans or emissions data as part of supplier assessments. And that's moving from not just scope 1 and 2, but also into scope 3, particularly at least, kind of 5 core categories of that, which brings in supply chain. And that's one of the reasons for, companies that have commitments on that, cascading that down to you, and you may have been the recipient of that phone call or email or reading into the tender that you're looking to apply for and going, right, okay, I really need to do something on this. So if you've not got anything in place, that will ultimately mean becoming excluded from those opportunities. That's not happening just yet, but it is increasingly becoming where we are going to get to. On the other hand, those that are proactive on this, who are reporting transparently and showing evidence of action, are winning more business, and they're doing it more affordably. So they're able to show, we can deliver our product more cost effectively, but we can also evidence that. We're not just kind of going, yeah, for every product we sell, we're going to plant a tree. And they're able to actually show in the data with a digital audit trail that they have done exactly that. Or they're going to say, we're going to be installing, smart meters across our range. That's going to allow us to identify the opportunities for reduction. Where those efficiency opportunities present themselves, we are going to take action on those, and we're going to, reap the rewards of that. They're able to show that in their data with that digital audit trail as they go along in real time. And that's a real point of differentiation when it comes down to putting forth a tender. It is one thing to kind of say it, it's another thing to be able to show it and prove it. So that is going to be increasingly where we go, and particularly with large multinationals with their own net zero obligations, many of them who are signed up to things like Science-Based Targets Initiative, and they may have a goal of engaging with, for example, 80% of their supply chain by the end of 2025 or 2026. And that means they're going to be asking for suppliers to supply them with their emissions data. Those that do supply the data will go to the front of the queue. Those that can't will be put in a separate pile, and they'll be thinking about, okay, do we transition away from those suppliers? Do we support them somehow? What do we do around all of that? And that is an ongoing conversation just now. So I suppose compliance isn't just about avoiding penalties. It is about staying relevant and competitive in a market that's increasingly rewarding responsible and forward-thinking suppliers. So let's make it real. What does that mean for a company? McCluskey is probably a company that many of you have heard of. You may work with them, but they are, a giant really in the Northern Ireland manufacturing scene. So across Northern Ireland and the UK, we are seeing clients cut emissions significantly, and 40% in under 2 years is massive. And as you can see here, McCluskey's have identified 13 projects collectively expected to result in a 66% reduction in emissions during 2025. That is huge. And that firmly aligns them with their 2030 target and places them as leaders in their industry. And you can see here as well, that is not just emissions reduction, that's £150,000 of savings as well. So this is very much bringing together, you know, how do we, evidence cost reduction, carbon reduction, differentiation in procurement, innovation in terms of manufacturing processes, resilience in terms of the energy supply that's coming in. And you can see that at play here with McCluskey's. So I think, a great example of a company embracing the opportunity that net zero represents. Technology obviously, plays a central role in effective energy and carbon management, particularly for manufacturers that want to drive those results without adding more manual workload. And, we hear, the term productivity all the time, but really that's what this is. How can we do more with the same or less? And this is where the technology opportunity comes in. And it is hard. We're often stuck in a kind of reactive form of management. There are day-to-day pressures. Somebody didn't show up to work. I need to get that done. I need to focus on that. And the delivery of managing my business rather than working on my business and and developing it for the future. The risk, of course, is others are going to leave you behind if you stay stuck in that reactive form of management. So considering what the opportunity for innovation is within your business and how you can integrate technology is going to be critical to that transformation. So this is going to help you, see how you can respond to bills or issues in a more predictive, forward-facing fashion rather than look at a bill or an issue after the fact when you can't really do something about it because you're kind of stuck with it for the next period of time. So to help you anticipate risks and identify opportunities in real time, energy dashboards are really the starting point. They give you live visual overviews of your consumption across different processes, time periods, buildings, so you can really spot the anomalies immediately rather than waiting for quarterly bills to flag problems, or even annually if you're kind of looking at things just at the end of the year or when your energy bill comes due or something like that. This is really an opportunity to think about this in terms of live management. So beyond that, automated reporting can also save you a lot of hours of admin each month in terms of internal tracking, carbon disclosures, preparing for grant submissions. You need to be able to prove what it is that you're doing. And, as we kind of already referenced, technology really can automate a lot of that. And it can get you that, data accurate, consistent, up to date, and as and when you need it. So the real game changer then, of course, is the predictive insights piece of all of this. So that historic data combined with intelligent analytics will now highlight your future risks, peak usage patterns, cost surges, equipment that's starting to underperform, and that allows you to act before problems escalate. It reduces downtime and it, of course, avoids unnecessary costs. In short, digital tools are no longer a luxury. They are a core part of how modern manufacturers manage energy smarter, faster, and importantly, more strategically. One of the biggest misconceptions, I think, is, around energy upgrades being too expensive or out of reach for smaller manufacturers. In reality, there's more funding support available than you may realize, particularly here in Northern Ireland and across the UK. Invest Now is a great example of this. They offer energy efficiency grants of up to £50,000, which can help cover the costs of installing energy saving equipment, upgrading lighting systems, or improving process efficiency. And those grants often require an independent energy audit to support the application. That's something, of course, that we support a lot of organizations with, but you can also apply into the Invest NI framework to get somebody like Carbonfit, and we are on that framework too, appointed to come and do that work for you. So there are real opportunities there to move along that pipeline. The Energy Efficiency Capital Grant also supports SMEs up to 20 to 50% funding towards eligible costs for carbon and energy reduction projects. That can include things like insulation, process heat recovery, energy efficiency plant upgrades. At a UK level, there's the Industrial Energy Transformation Fund. It's a significant source of support, specifically designed for manufacturers, and it offers large-scale funding for projects that can reduce industrial energy use and cut emissions. Again, similar technologies covered as to that of Invest in I, but perhaps on a larger scale. And the Digital Transformation Flexible Fund, also critical, particularly if you want to get a handle on the data and you want to integrate that piece. It's kind of a rolling thing. So there'll be a new opportunity to apply and express interest for that coming up in due course, but it's definitely one to keep an eye on. Innovation, net zero related R&D grants, often available through Innovate UK. Again, there are R&D opportunities coming through all the time for Invest in I as well on a rolling basis. The key, really to unlocking these funds is having a clear project pipeline. It's understanding your data, it's spotting those opportunities, it's having a strategy in place. That you can say, listen, this is not just I'd like to have this because it's nice and shiny and my competitor has it. It's something that's supported and backed by evidence and that can show the potential impact from carbon reduction and energy savings to increase your productivity and to increase your resilience. I suppose that's really what we want to do in helping companies in Northern Ireland. Most of all, it is to help you to scope out, quantify, prepare your proposals in a way that meet the criteria and maximize your chances of success. Critical, of course, and a really often overlooked piece of the puzzle here is a strategy is all well and good, but many people will be familiar with that phrase that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And it does. Your people are absolutely crucial to your success. And I saw a really fantastic presentation from Mark Hutchinson on this at the Anchor High Summit, and it is about your people. We hear time and time again, Northern Ireland's people are, they're our superpower, and engaging your team is absolutely critical to your success. You can have the best tech, but it's your people who are really going to drive energy savings. And, behavior change is absolutely massive within all of this. So awareness is the first step. If your staff understand where energy is wasted and why it matters, they're more likely to act on that. Behavior change alone can deliver up to 10% in savings just by doing things like switching off equipment, reporting issues, running processes more efficiently. And that really adds up. But I think don't underestimate how pulling teams of people that are going to look at this from across your different areas of your business, the different functions of your business coming together. When they understand things through this lens collectively, they see things in a new way, and the innovation that can come from that is absolutely staggering. I'll touch on this again, kind of coming up, but kind of cross-functional innovation is massive for companies because this can help you, make a breakthrough on process innovation online. It can help you, start to think about how you, market your product in a new way. So it could be a marketing thing. It could be how you articulate things in a tender. It could be how you design out waste. And again, there's a lot of support for things to do with any of those different elements if you spot them. And it's your teams that know it. They do these things day in and day out, and they're often isolated in silos. If you bring them together, you're really going to see what the opportunities are, and they're going to be bought in from the start. So to make it stick, you got to train them, you got to reward them, you got to involve them. You need to give them some knowledge, recognize their efforts. If there is something, and it can be small, you really got to celebrate those wins and build that momentum. Give them those, the opportunity to have a go. And when everyone feels part of the journey, the results go far beyond compliance. They start to transform your culture. And that at the end of the day is the culture that anybody wants to work for. So if you can build that, Hutchinson would really attest to that. That's really what's propelled their business. But there's lots of other examples. Seating Matters is a brilliant one too. I'm going to bring it back to another quick real world example from one of our clients here, Camlin. Targeted energy efficiency strategy. They achieved 56% reduction in their scope 1 and 2 emissions. They removed over 153 tons of CO2 from their operations. They switched to 100% renewable electricity. They've also reached, which has helped them reach their scope 2 net zero goal. On top of that, they've delivered a further 13% reduction across their total carbon footprint, including scope 3, and they're now diving into supply chain. So they are really moving and shaking in terms of what they're doing, and they're showing the power of smart data-driven energy action. All of their strategy has been driven by data, and it's showing in their results. I've not included the cost savings here because it's a commercial point for them at this stage, but I think it's absolutely critical to remember that when you take these actions, there are the huge opportunities, not just in terms of carbon reduction, but in terms of driving your business forward and making those cost efficiencies in your energy consumption. So I mentioned I had a bit of an offer for everybody, kind of moving towards the end of this now, and I think a great place to start, and Camlin evidenced this as well, is a quick energy health check. We're going to offer this out free for any company, that's part of Manufacturing NI, that's been on this webinar, that's, just part of the network. If you'd like a free health check on your energy, we're partnered with a really fantastic financial organization, BDO, and we're going to take a quick look into your energy bills for you if you'd like. And we can analyze your current setup, see if you're eligible for any rebates, see if we could switch you to a lower cost green tariff. You may be aware that pass-through costs in your energy bill come into effect, in terms of an increase at the end of September, and the winter tariffs kick in from the end of October. So your prices are set to rise, particularly the end of this month, the end of next month, especially if you're out of contract at the moment. So, it's a great way to kind of quickly, reduce your exposure. If you want to scan that QR code, it takes about 2 minutes, pop in your details. You can upload, electricity bill, gas bill. It'll take you a couple of minutes and it could save you thousands. That's really it. I wanted to leave with that, just a quick opportunity from us, quick opportunity to take some action and transition to a green supply and save yourself some money in all hope. Okay, so here's my details again, just to wrap up. The energy opportunity is certainly real. Savings, resilience, and compliance are all in reach. And if you'd like to do something about that, we'd love to chat with you. Okay, thanks very much, everybody.
Ben, thank you so much for that. Very clear narrative around the need to do something to begin with. And secondly, leaving people with a free offer is always a good place to end any presentation. So I'm sure people will take up on that. We will share details of that in our e-signs after the event alongside the recording and all your slides as well. A couple of questions for you, maybe if I just kind of kick off. I mean, we have hugely powerful tools in our hands in terms of our mobile phones. We're constantly kind of not just using it as a means to kind of check up on football scores or our social media habits or whatever the case may be. But we're using it increasingly in terms of just kind of looking at data and analyzing it, even just from a business's point of view, checking where the exchange rate is at the moment. That's all data driven. Why are more businesses not kind of getting on board with those kind of digital dashboards and digital tools? They see what's happening within their operations so that they can act on it in some sort of live manner. What can people do? You highlighted some of those tools and dashboards. What can people do really simply now to kind of get going and get cracking on this carbon reduction and managing their energy better?
I think, smart metering is that place to start. And I suppose, you can do that at the meter level, or you can do it at the sub-meter level. And even just one, even if you just kind of get, one smart data point, that can link back to a dashboard. And there's lots of options out there. If people are, curious or want some recommendations about that, we're, more than happy to help and support, identify some of those options for people. But depending on, what your processes are, you're probably going to have an inkling on, where is the biggest area of your consumption. But it can be some of the smaller areas too, or the overlooked things, stuff like, leaving the heating on at 30 degrees at 4 o'clock in the morning because somebody forgot to switch it off because it's just an old system that hasn't been upgraded. And you might have a fancy new plasma cutter, but you haven't looked at your heating system in quite some time. Um, I think it's that stuff. And often, as I kind of mentioned in the presentation, we can really get bogged down often in just the day to day, such and such didn't weigh into work, or we've got this new contract that's just come in, we've got to deliver it, and we're busy in the doing, and we forget to do the working on the business. And I think, some of these solutions are very quick, they are very simple, they're very easy to get going with, they're not expensive. I mean, smart metering is, it can be kind of, in the, 1 to 5K range, to kind of get going with an initial setup of smart metering, to get you that initial data back. And the savings can be absolutely massive within that. So linking up with something like that, linking that to an intelligent carbon dashboard also saves a lot of time. Of course, I would say that because we're Carbonfit, and we do that sort of thing. But whether you do it with us or you do it with somebody else, I think the logic tracks. Those dashboards are there for you. They make a lot of sense. You may already have one. And it's just about, again, building it into your monthly or quarterly management meetings. Make it an agenda item. Check in on it. It can be as simple as that. You might have got a subscription to something, but you might not actually look at it. But the simple point of making an agenda point can really make a difference on that.
And if you wouldn't mind putting the QR code back up again, just so I leave that slide on the screen for now, Ben, that would be really helpful. We've put the link in the chat to the free offer as well. But if you can leave that QR code there for now, that'll be helpful too. Just to put what you've said there into some sort of context, like we measure hours worked, mileage. Everybody puts a mileage claim in every month, and somebody's checking it, etc., etc., etc. Yet one of the biggest bills that we have in any manufacturing business is our energy bill. For most manufacturers, it tends to be the third largest bill after wages and supply chain. Yet we don't give ourselves as live as possible information on that. So just smart metering, as you say, uh, puts it on the same status as somebody's mileage claim or a petty cash reconciliation every month, which every business will be doing already. And I'll give a very practical example of this. One of my most favorite stories in manufacturing is that it's one of our members. This is pre-smart metering days and dashboard days, which are all coming now more common and more available. Uh, but they asked someone that they knew and trusted to kind of look at their energy bills and try to work out what was going on with them. And the guy had spreadsheets after spreadsheets after spreadsheets, and a bit like Rain Man, he could kind of see patterns and numbers rather than actually using a system or some sort of level of artificial intelligence. But he noticed that every second Wednesday, in the month, there was a spike in their energy bills at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Mhm.
So he came back and he spoke to the management. The management were perplexed. They don't know why. They don't know why that's happening. And it took them a few weeks to actually work out that one of the guys in the business was a farmer. He was up in the early in the mornings. I went and milked the cows or got the farm going for the day. Then he came to work, and being a really conscientious employee, he switched everything on in the factory so that all his colleagues that arrived had a factory ready to run. So all the lights were on, the heating was on, all the air pumps were on, all the machines were beginning to run, the extractor fans, etc., etc., etc. Doing the right thing, preparing the workplace for all his colleagues to arrive so that they didn't need to do that. And then he went and had his breakfast. So he arrived at the factory at 5, turned everything on, made himself a cup of tea and a bit of toast, waited for his colleagues to arrive. That cost the business, they worked out, in the region of £27,000 per year. Now, how can you argue with a guy that's so good at it and so conscientious that he's improving the workplace for his colleagues to arrive? So all they said to him was, listen, continue to do what you're doing, but come in and make your breakfast first and then switch everything on. And that saved the business £27,000 per year. So the cost of a smart meter compared to running just two Thursday mornings for an hour every single month, it begins to put it into some sort of context. So unless you have visibility on these things, you really can't take action. And certainly we would be recommending that people do pick up some sort of dashboard, smart metering, have as live as possible information about their energy costs and their energy consumption so that they can manage those costs as they go through their business. You also mentioned a whole series of different funding pots that are available both at a local council, Northern Ireland, and UK national level, Ben. A lot of manufacturers don't like involving themselves with those things because the admin involved and the record of success sometimes isn't the best. Is that something that Carbonfit actually assist with? Do you sit down and work with the business about how to complete and properly secure those grants?
We do, absolutely. It's something we do time and time again with our clients because, as you say, nobody likes filling in forms, and they kind of like going, okay, we spotted that as an opportunity, brilliant. Now let's get it. Like, how do we get that? And they just want to then have it, rather than kind of go through the steps of, now here's the bureaucracy that we need to go through in order to enable that. So that's something that people can outsource to us, in that support to make that happen. And it's the same, going back to your previous example there, just about, you know, who is checking in and saying, are you on the best deal? Or where is that piece of the puzzle that says, whatever that saint of a man his name was that came in, you know, that spike in the energy, and just that simple behavior change piece for him. It's somebody having a little look at that with you, checking through those things, helping understand that, and also going, and okay, so if we just save that, in terms of consumption, well, that's £27,000 a year. But if we do that and we shift you onto a better tariff for that, and we help automate that to make sure that that is something that is, you know, happening in the most optimized fashion, maybe we can squeeze a bit more out of that, and maybe that fella could have his breakfast for free
Buy him
as
his
a
breakfast,
reward
yeah.
for for that, because I think that's what the opportunity, cost savings, can do, especially if it's coming from, somebody that's doing something brilliant. It's rewarding your staff as part of that, and incentivizing that action. Brilliant, make that workplace better. But let's find those efficiencies as we go along.
And you gave a couple of kind of practical examples from some of our larger and more successful companies, McCloskey and Camlin. But obviously, the vast majority of businesses in Northern Ireland are SMEs.
Sure.
Do these principles apply to them as equally as it does to those larger guys?
They absolutely do, Stephen. I think the scale, I think it's proportionate. Of course there are economies of scale, And some of those kind of very large, six-figure sums and so on are going to be in seven-figure sums, even in some cases, are going to be in the large energy consumer category. But anybody, as you say, the third biggest bill in pretty much any manufacturer is their energy bill. So if you can shave, 20% off that, that's significant to anybody's bottom line. So that proportional effect carries right the way through. Those opportunities for efficiencies carry right the way through. And in fact, the smaller you are, the faster you can move with some of this stuff. The smaller you are, the less complex some of those systems need to be as well. So the investment actually to do things can be a lot less as well. So, and that payback can then be even faster. So I think, again, it comes back to understanding where's the opportunity. That comes back to the data, but absolutely proportional opportunity carries whether you're large or whether you're small.
And I often find speaking to manufacturing businesses, they're offered the choice uh, of introducing something that would make them more efficient versus buying a new machine. They often are kind of something shiny is often the more attractive to them. But if you kind of think about it, like the average gross margin in manufacturing is 10%. The average net is 3%. If you're saving 10 grand at 10% gross, that's 100 grand's worth of additional turnover that you need to find just to pay for that 10 grand. So that's like winning for a small business. That's like winning a new contract, like winning a new customer. So you can, when you start to kind of think differently about this efficiency piece and that in that sort of context, it begins to kind of the numbers begin to change a little bit, and the importance of these numbers begin to change a little bit. So yeah, we would agree. We've seen some great examples in small businesses as well as those larger ones that are focused on trying to be as efficient as they possibly can. I was intrigued there. You said that actually switching to some renewable tariffs could actually save money on energy for businesses. And in the past, there was certainly a premium put on those renewable tariffs as people, I suppose, put them as a bit of a badge on their product in many respects. So the energy retail companies were selling them with a premium rather than what you're suggesting here, which is actually there's potentially a significant discount now to be had and savings to be had. Can you give us a little bit more about that? Because that seemed to be a change in the marketplace.
Sure. I think one of the reasons I can say that is because we broker a very significant amount of energy on behalf of our clients. And because when we're going en masse to the energy companies, particularly looking for renewable energy, they can give it then at a much more preferential rate, and they're competing with each other to give that more preferential rate on that. So it's becoming, I think, a really exciting dynamic opportunity within the energy supply arena to provide, a cost incentive for companies to switch to green supply, because it is becoming that area of choice. It's the easy thing to do, to reduce your scope 2 emissions, switch to a green supply. And if you can do that on cost neutral or better cost savings basis, then it's kind of a no-brainer, really. And so I think if you go individually, you may find it's still more expensive. If you go together, you may find, as we are finding, that we can get a much more competitive offer back from the suppliers at the moment.
And we see that in other areas, like even on a community basis, there are like energy buying co-ops
Yeah,
where a small town or a part of a village or whatever the case may be, that may be just on oil, home heating oil, well, they actually collectively add their entire demand together, and then they sell that demand en masse at a discounted price. So instead of paying £1 for one item, you're paying 90p for 100 items, but you're getting the 90p because you're still using the same amount. So that energy basket type principle is where the
yeah,
savings are being found.
exactly. That's exactly it. It is, it's grouping up into volume that allows the opportunity to get the more preferential rates. And so you can either do that, and I know that, part of the Invest Now industrial strategy, was really looking at that opportunity as well. And, there were some huge efficiencies found. I can't remember, Eugene was talking about some of the efficiencies a short while back, and I was kind of blown away. It was kind of like, in some cases, like I want to say like 75% more cost effective to go together in some things. Um, and I wouldn't say that we can do 75% better on your energy bill by going together, but we are definitely finding significant reductions in there as well. And one of the other things you'll see there is, rebates or cost recovery there as well. And there can be hidden charges in your energy bill. And so we can look at that, particularly with the support of, like our strategic partner BDO, and like going back rebates of, kind of 3 years and so on. That can be a huge cost saving as well, and then the ongoing cost savings. So the rebate, one rebate we got back recently for a client was 6 figures on a rebate just from their energy bill that they've already paid. And then they're saving, kind of moving forwards on that as well, because they no longer have that piece in their bill. So it's not something you can see normally just on your bill. You kind of have to dive into it, which is why we're working with BDO on that.
And let's face it, I mean, energy bills for domestic consumers are simplified. They're just, you pay 25 pence per unit. That's the amount of units. That's the bill at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But for manufacturing businesses, in fact, for all businesses, these are multiple pages of lines of stuff that people just do not have a clue what it is, what it's even about.
Yeah.
And there's been many examples in my time in manufacturing there's been many examples where people have been paying charges for things that they've never actually needed or consumed.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're paying even for electricity or the availability of electricity that they'll never require, but they're being penalized on their bill because that's been made available to them. Or sometimes they're even consuming more energy than what their connection provides them, and there's a penalty there as well. So there's having an expert eye on those bills can easily find significant savings for people. And we would always encourage people to have somebody to check their bills for them, somebody with knowledge and expertise. They're great at making the product. They make things, they make widgets, they make their manufacturing product. They don't make electricity. For many, this is just something that they consume within their business, a commodity. So actually having somebody with that expert eye is an easy win in many ways, even just to assure them that they're actually paying the right charges for certain things.
100%. And you may be absolutely bang on with what you're doing, and you may find, actually, I didn't realize my contract's lapsed. I'm on the most expensive tariff available. I could be on a cheaper tariff. I've got these charges that are in there that I didn't know that I had, and now there's a rebate opportunity, and all of a sudden you have an investment fund to buy that new shiny bit of kit, or to automate what you're doing, or to make that leap in your business that you need to. And as you say, that can be, as beneficial as winning a new customer or a couple of new customers.
Exactly. Ben, our time is up. I think we've exhausted the questions that have come in. There is that offer on the screen. We will be sharing details afterwards. There's a link in the chat as well for those that want to do it old school rather than taking their phone out of their pocket and scanning a QR code. Thank you so much for such a clear presentation. I do think that there's significant opportunity to be had here for manufacturers to not only save themselves significant money, but begin their journey on that decarbonisation piece. It's the next piece that's coming down the track at everyone. It's already here for our larger manufacturers. It's going to be there for all of us and all manufacturers in the very near future. So do reach out, get in contact with Ben, or even through ourselves, and we'll happily give you an introduction. Ben, thank you for your time today, and thank you for your offer.
Thank you very, very much, Stephen. It's been a real pleasure to be on board, and thanks everybody for tuning in today. Really appreciate it. And as Stephen says, we're here if you want to reach out. There's an opportunity there for everybody. Thank you.
Great stuff. Thanks very much.